All right. Good evening to all the venerable monks and nuns. Good evening to our friends and devotees who are here on Zoom platform. And also good evening to our friends who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube Live. I would like to welcome all of you to our bi-weekly discussion with the venerable monks and nuns living in North America. So every 2 weeks we meet here on Zoom platform with a new question from a friend or fan who are very keen in this discussion. So today we have a very important topic to discuss. So before we begin our discussion, let us pay our respect and homage to the Buddha, and after that I will introduce all the monks and nuns to our audience. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I pay my respect and homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened Buddha. Dear friends, now let me introduce our venerable monks and nuns to our audience. So today we have the presence of Bhante Uparatana from Washington, D.C., Virginia. And we have Bhante Nanda joining us from Long Island Buddhist Meditation Center in Long Island. He is joining us with one of his keen students. He's also there watching this program with him. And then we have Venerable Trudeau joining us from Florida. And then we have Bhante Sanata Vihari joining us from Los Angeles, California. And we have Bhante Jayasara joining us from New York. I can't hear you. Okay.
Still in New Jersey, just at a different
New Jersey, okay.
empty cloud for the Vasa.
Wonderful. And then we have Bhante Santasobana joining us from Los Angeles, California. And we have Bhante Saranapala, he's another Saranapala, joining us from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And then we have Bhante Kusales here, and also Bhante Vimala Jyoti. So other venerable monks and nuns, they will be joining us maybe later on. I think there are a lot of things happening at the temple, maybe they occupied. So whoever is here, I'm very grateful to have your presence for today's discussion. And also we have some devotees who joined us on the Zoom platform. We would like to welcome you. And then we also have friends and students who are watching this program on Facebook and YouTube Live. And we also would like to welcome all of you. And I have a very kind request from all of you. If it is possible, please share this discussion in your social media timeline for the greater well-being and the benefit of your friends and colleagues who follow you in the social media. So today's topic of the discussion is many adults are still struggling with childhood traumas and how to deal with and overcome traumas? This is a question I have received from one of our friends who are very keen in the teachings of the Buddha. And of course, I also know, since we do spiritual counseling, there are a lot of people who come to us for some help. And so this is real, and people are still going through difficulties in their life. And I know we are not professional psychologists or counselors or psychotherapists, but we monks, of course, we dedicated our life to helping the people who are going through a lot of difficulties in their life. And of course, people come to us, tell their stories, and we try our best to help people. And I'm pretty sure all the participating monks and nuns and in today's discussion, you also have been doing the same thing for a long time. Maybe you have your own experiences, you have your own understanding about the trauma and how you help people who are seeking some spiritual help or professional help. So I was, when I sent an email to all the Venerable monks and nuns regarding today's discussion, Venerable Bhante Sanat Vihari from Los Angeles gave us a very prompt reply to this discussion. He recommended all the monks to read 2 books and to have a very productive discussion. And I was also told that he has taken a special course on the trauma and master's level course. And do you have a better understanding of this topic? So I would like to begin with the Venerable Bhante Sanat Vihari from Los Angeles. Now, what do you have to say about today's topic, Venerable Sanat Vihari?
Bhante, Venerables, thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, so this has actually been a topic that I've been kind of studying for the last 3 years. And most recently in this last year, I've been actually working with people who have experienced trauma at a community mental health facility in order to finish up my degree in counseling psychology. But yeah, there's those great books that I shared, like amazing books. And I just wanted to kind of like right now start off by kind of planting the field, like, what do we mean by trauma? You know, sometimes, you know, people use it differently. And, you know, what is the landscape out there? Like, to what degree do people experience trauma? And then sometimes people, you know, kind of associate trauma with PTSD. And me being a veteran, they're like, have you experienced trauma? Yes. Oh, you must have PTSD. I'm like, no, they're different things, you know? So sometimes we may not know exactly what we're talking about and what terms we're using. So, and I just kind of wanted to share some facts in the beginning, and then just kind of give like us as monks, what can we do and what can we add to the conversation and help our communities. So just starting off with trauma, like according to the American Psychological Association, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible incident, like a tragedy or like a car accident, with witnessing somebody being murdered or being emotionally abused for a long time. Or, you know, you can imagine a million horrible scenarios that you can go through, right? It's basically it's when a person experiences something when it's like too much for them to cope with, right? They can't self-regulate. We as humans, we have to be able to self-regulate to come back to homeostasis. And then there might be some event that is overstimulating for our nervous system. We can't process it. It's just too intense, right? So then what happens? So then usually before we get to that or around that area, we have what is called as the general adaptation syndrome, which most people know as like fight, flight, freeze, right? Yeah. Or pass out, exhaustion, right? So sometimes what happens is when you can't fight, right? Or you can't run away, you're stuck. What happens? You're in this situation where it's too overwhelming for you, right? You can't handle it. So those are the situations, and when we feel helpless, when we can't process, when we can't cope with what's going on, that, you know, trauma can become big trauma, like big T trauma, where it lasts for a long time. And then if it's, very severe, it can probably lead to things like PTSD or different kind of like disorders like disassociation and derealization, these kind of symptoms where you feel separated and you lose touch with your body. So that's one thing that I think that we need to understand when we talk about today about trauma and what it means. Another thing is that according to the CDC, about 61% of adults surveyed across 25 different states had experienced at least one type of adverse childhood experience, meaning like trauma, before the age of 18. And nearly 1 in 6 reported they had an experience 4 or more types of these kind of adverse childhood experiences, which means traumatic experiences as a child. Also, according to the Substance and Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, 61% of men and 51% of women reported at least one traumatic event in their lives. So we can see that this is like, something that is prevalent in our society. About like half of us or more than half of us have experienced some sort of traumatic event and in our childhood, right? Because I know the question had to relate to childhood experiences and trauma. And then how do we process those? How do we overcome those in the present day? So usually when we talk about trauma in childhood, they're known as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, or DTs, developmental trauma. And some interesting things, they did some studies and where they score people's like these ACE different levels. And they found that people who score higher in these kind of adverse childhood experiences were more prone to all different kinds of like diseases and ailments, including 3 times more likely to get heart disease, lung cancer. Their life expectancy was shortened by 20 years. All these kind of things. Even they were doing the study where they were trying to figure out, how can we get people to lose weight and keep it off? And they found a lot of these people couldn't lose weight or keep it off due to these traumas in the past. It was the trauma that was keeping them locked in this kind of like eating over again. It was their way of coping with it. And I remember one account of one of the participants, she said that the reason that she stayed overweight is because when she would lose weight, she would be found attractive by men. And that would remind her of the time when she was sexually abused, and it brought back all that trauma. So her way to keep people away was to stay obese, and that way she wouldn't get attention from men. That was the way she was coping with that trauma. So we can find all kinds of like these childhood traumas. These things are not something that happen to a few people. It happens to almost, half of us. We all know someone, even here, like half of these monks can have experienced some sort of trauma as a child, or even nowadays as an adult. But there's a lot of good news too, because humans have this thing called resilience. When we look at events like at 9/11, we were expecting at that time when 9/11 happened, they got all like the psychologists and counselors and therapists in New York to come together and like, what are we going to do? There's going to be a lot of people with PTSD. We have to prepare. But that never happened. We didn't get thousands and thousands of people with PTSD because humans are so resilient. We can experience trauma and be able to cope with it. But the key factors that they found so far is this sense of being able to process it, to have a community, to have someone to talk to be able to contextualize it. So people who have good family members, good friends, maybe a monk that they can talk to, and they experience something, if they can go to that person and kind of lean on that person, that increases significantly their ability to be able to, overcome that traumatic experience or process it in a healthy way where it doesn't become this trauma, which is going to be perpetuated for the rest of their lives. So for a lot of these studies, they found that one of the key factors, especially for children, is to be able to have someone that they can trust and they can lean on, like a Kalyanamita, to bring it back to Buddhism. That Kalyanamita factor is so important when it comes to trauma, especially with children, because children don't have the ability to completely self-regulate, right? Their brains are not completely developed. They depend on others. They really need someone else to help them regulate. And for children, it really helps to like soothe them, to talk to them nicely, to touch them, to hug them. They're very, sensual in the way they cope with things. So for children, who have experienced this thing, one of the things that we found is just, like being a good friend, being a good mom, taking care of your kid, hugging them, kissing them, telling them that you love them. There's this very interesting incident that happened about one of these kids. So from his elementary school, he saw a person jump off one of the Twin Towers in New York. And his parents took him home and they saw him drawing. And they said, "What are you drawing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm drawing a trampoline." "Why are you drawing a trampoline?" "Also, when the people jump off the building, they can land on the trampoline and they don't have to die." Right? that was his way to deal with it. But he was lucky that his parents were there with him. They talked to him about it. They processed it. And this child didn't get any long-lasting trauma. He didn't get PTSD, even though he himself saw the people fall and hit the ground and, you know, die. He was able to overcome that overstimulating experience by being able to rely on his parents and the support of his parents. But now I kind of want to go to another direction, which I think will be more interesting for us. And I think they might be like the monks might bring a little more to this conversation or maybe some debate, is the use of like meditation or mindfulness, right? And dealing with trauma. So I have this book right here, which is very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, hold on. Can you show it again, please? You have to speak.
Yes, it's called Disassociation, Mindfulness, and Creative Meditations. So a lot of people who experience trauma, especially if it's physical, like they were assaulted, they were raped, you know, something physical happened to them. When they practice mindfulness, that brings them back to their body. And by bringing them back to their body, they can re-experience that trauma, right? So if they do a body scan and maybe, you know, some part of their body was hurt or molested, when they go to that part of the body, that memory of that bad incident comes up, right? Or you tell them to focus on the breath and they remember how they were breathing that one time that one bad thing happened to them. So you know, this book kind of says that we need to be very careful when we approach people with trauma, especially these kind of like rape or physical assault, because it can trigger this kind of disassociative state where the person separates from their body, where it can bring back all that torture that happened when they were a child by bringing them back to the body. But the author also says that she gives us like 5 or 6 steps that we can use to utilize to help us teach a person mindfulness with trauma, you know? So sometimes, you know, we kind of think like, well, mindfulness is just good in itself. But we have to be careful, you know, when we tell someone to do a body scan or to pay attention to their body or something, there might be a part of their body that they're not comfortable with. And that can bring this huge pain, all this dukkha, all this domanassa from the past that they've experienced. And we ourselves might be overwhelmed because we're not trained to deal with people like that, right? And we can feel bad, oh, I hurt this person or I did something bad. So I think it's very important of us to be very careful and cautious when we deal with people who have experienced trauma or PTSD or some sort of, you know, kind of adverse thing, especially if it was during their childhood and they've been carrying it for all these years, because the longer it stays in the mind, in the organism, in the brain, the more difficult it is to kind of overcome and the more likely it is that it's going to get triggered. So we kind of have to take all these things into consideration. You know, it's just not kind of like, well, it works for me, or I think in theory it should work for you. We need to be very skillful in the way that we apply these kind of techniques that for a regular person might help. But for these people who experience, you know, terrible traumatic events, it might just send them back into this kind of, even lead them into a depressive state or cause more anxiety and lead them into some sort of a general anxiety, social anxiety, bring up some sort of a disorder in the future. So I just kind of wanted to share these facts and these kind of, you know, different ways of handling it, you know. And I think the thing that we could take away from it is the Kalyanamita aspect, having people that you can rely on, having friends and people that you could talk to when something happens to you. And I think that's something that we all do. As Bhante was saying, people come to us for a reason because we're like their Kalyanamitas. And I think just being able to listen to them, maybe we don't even have to offer anything. Just being a person to hold that space with them and telling them, I care about you. You know, you're someone important to me. And no matter what happened to you, I see you as a real person, as the person that you are. And I don't hold any stigma against you or any taboos or anything, you know, just being that person who can really be compassionate towards them. I think that's something that we can do without having all this training of like trauma and all these kind of things. Bhante. That's it.
Well, thank you, Bhante Sanata Vihari, for explaining the true nature of trauma and what people go through and how we can help. And of course, we see some people putting their thumbs up for what you have just said. You know, it's amazing to see the young monk like you. And of course, you have taken a course on this, and you have learned some techniques. And with the teachings of the Buddha or meditation or Dharma, I believe we can help many more people. So we have 3 venerable monks raised their hands to add their insights. Bante Kusala from Mississauga, what do you have to say about today's topic?
Thank you, Bante, for the opportunity. I loved what was shared by Bante Sanatavihari. Very insightful and very well prepared, and sort of setting up the stage for us to discuss, and we can go in many directions. And he included some aspects of meditation that we can utilize to overcome trauma or to change our perspective toward trauma. I like to specifically highlight, how childhood trauma can have a lasting impact on your life and on your career and in your social life in general. What I wanted to share is just a basic experience. Like when we are in school, sometimes teachers look at us and say, give a speech before the whole school. And that can be a moment where, you kind of feel publicly humiliated because you are unprepared in some ways. Sometimes you feel proud because the teacher thinks that you are capable of doing it, but you are not prepared. And somehow you face these moments and accept those realities. And then sometimes some embarrassing events happen that are out of your control. And as a child, all we do is we associate them with our personal life. So in other words, we take them personally. Sometimes we often go in the negative direction and say, we are not able to do this. We are bad at this. Let me avoid speaking in front of a whole class next time. By doing so, we save a lot of shame, a lot of dignity. And I'm telling this to the teachers, if you are a teacher, why not give a plan to the student? Why not prepare them? Why not give them a script? Because you will be giving them ideas, you will be giving them time and space to prepare, and in doing so, you are giving confidence to them. So what if you have gone through many years of school without getting any training, and now you come to work in your real life and you have to still be presenting your ideas in front of large groups? Even then, if you didn't have a proper training, you will be still feeling a lot of self-awareness, self-judgment, anxiety, nervousness, and not knowing how to begin something and how to end something, what to say in the middle, how to attract the audience and stuff like that. No one is ever prepared for these things. No one is perfect in these things, but our self-judgment is so strong. Sometimes we feel ourselves, crushing us, beating us up, and not giving us any light or wisdom. And even for us monks to speak in English in these countries, sometimes it makes us very nervous. So I see that many monks don't come forward to speak. It all comes down to the how we look at it and how we understand it. And one time I remember when I was in Indonesia, I went through this hypnosis session done by Sister Brenda, and she made me go through several stages of my life. I think in a way she took me to the childhood where I didn't have any traumatic experience in life. And she asked me to hug this child, the same me, and welcome that child back to this present life, and embrace it, and know it fully, and know that you still have this person to work with, fully craft completely again, and build a life that is different from having the traumatic experiences or post-traumatic experiences. So I think after that hypnosis experience, I felt so relieved. I felt better, and I felt like I'm complete and full again. And most people don't see the power of this kind of simple techniques that has an impact has a healing effect on your life, on your core being as a human being. But if you still have, like, I remember using the Kalyana Mitra support, talking to Sister Kema at some point at Dhammasukha Meditation Center in Missouri, and how we discussed ideas about how things arise and how things are never permanent, and how we ourselves give this too much space to it. All want to present ourselves as perfect people, and this is a little attachment there. It's a little craving there. When that sometimes it's hard for us to recognize that we have this craving, and when we are dealing with that in real life, whether it is craving or not, we feel like there's just embarrassing moments where you feel like you are being judged by everyone, and you still face these moments, and over time you realize you are getting better at things, much better than you used to be. So and this I share with any young person, any child who is dealing with such anxieties. Please give yourself some time. Please know that things definitely will need time to evolve. You need time to evolve. You need new experiences, but never give up. Never give space into fear or nervousness or anxiety, because if you do that, you are kind of living like closet, maybe like closed life, and nobody's aware that you have these talents. And please accept opportunities and prepare and present your ideas. If you feel any negativity, please know that you want to do better. That is why you feel this way. So you kind of change your perspective toward it. But let me also bring bring everyone's attention to this one experience someone shared with me, that when he was a child, he was living in a hostel in Colombo with other friends, and one time those friends happened to put a pillow on his face, and that made him suffocate in some ways. And now, as an adult, he's in his late 60s, and he still has traumatic experiences about this one event that occurred in his life without his control. That every time he closes his eyes to sleep, he wakes up. His brain reacts in a bizarre way, and it's affecting his married life. It's affecting all his life. And it only started after that experience. Sometimes you do something playfully and it affects this person forever. So he goes through this experience as an adult. So something that happened in their childhood is affecting their adult life like forever. Therefore, I am telling anyone who is kind of playfully doing these things, please abstain from doing them, because you never know what you are doing and how you are kind of affecting their life and their future. So for that person who is grappling with this issue, I would say, when, always talk to therapists and always try to maybe like slowly educate yourself again and again that this event took place and it didn't kill you or it didn't do anything bad, and that it will not happen again. And so retelling the story and maybe doing some hypnosis to predate the event and embracing that person back to your life and telling you that you are no longer that same person who went through the dark experience, but you can now live fully without thinking of that experience. That would help, but I know it's super hard, and it's not something to be ashamed of, and it's also not something that has to live in your life forever. And of course, there are moments where you feel like it is a sign of weakness. It's a inner failing, and it simply affects everything that you do in your life. But of course, that is understandable. But talk to friends, talk to people, never isolate yourself with this one problem. And yeah, see the larger picture, where you see that your life is flowering fully, that you are giving giving attention to others nicely, you are taking care of people nicely, and you are being a wonderful father, you are being a wonderful husband. Share these moments with others and share your life also in beautiful way. And I think that will create new memories, and that will give you some strength and support to live your life. So I have more to share, but I like to hear from other venerables. Thank you for this moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bante Kusala, for telling some stories and your personal experience, how you have dealt with them. And also, like as you know, we started this bi-weekly discussion to help the monks to emotional prepare to speak, to give a Dhamma talk in English anywhere. I think our monks are doing amazing now. As Bante Kusala said that in the beginning of his presentation, I also had the same experience when I came here. My teacher just basically pushed me to conduct the session, but I wasn't prepared. I didn't know. I was struggling with English, but I managed to do it. But again, it at the beginning it was kind of traumatizing experience for me. But then I took that that feeling, that experience, that opportunity to make myself who I am today. You know, I said thanks to my teachers, my other friends, as Bante Sanativihari said, you know, we all need Kalyanamitas, you know, the kind and caring person, a compassionate person who can be gentle to us, who can help us. It's very important. And now let us go to Bante Katugasada Uparatana from Washington, D.C. Bante Uparatana, you have been a monk for a long time. You're the most senior monk among us right now. And I know, Bante Uparatana, you have been doing an amazing service to the people in the United States for a long time. As far as I know, more than 3 decades. And you have a lot of experience, Bante. Now, please share with us and our audience your experience, your insights, how to deal with the childhood traumas and how to overcome them.
Yes, Venerable Sarampala, friends. And this is a kind of thing today we are facing very seriously. And lucky, most of our young monks these days and hospital chaplaincy, or they are training, they have kind of experience.
Yeah.
And they're so nice, and I'm so happy because that's the our part of our monks' duty for the service to the community. That's very nice thing. And meanwhile, we are facing the another psychological and other issues. And same time, as a Buddhist monk, as a high ordained monk, they're the especially not to encourage someone to die when we have to supposed to save them according to Buddhist rule, and sabbe satta bhavan sugitatta, always we have to that kind of kind compassionate to the all living being, not only the childhood but the different ages. And we are, as a monk, we have a lot of problems, difficulties to this trauma situation to the patient, to the in hospitalized, or sometimes their family members emotionally acting, and some saying, oh, that person who very trouble at seriously ill, and better than he suffering and take off the cord. That kind of things they're asking monks to do it. Then it's really serious situation, monk to face in that situation, not to take off the cord, because that is not our way. Even though we cannot encourage them to do that as a monk, that is below the doctor, or this below to their family members. So there's a kind of Vinaya rules and kind of our way we have to aware, and we are facing day to day that kind of problem, we have to think about how to make a solution for emotional family members. And the person who critical, he may be going to say goodbye to us, we don't know, but still, and the situation for the family members to make a peaceful announcement, how their emotion control, how we have to advise to them, that kind of things we have to discuss. And that's a kind of situation all the time, many times happen to me. I never encourage them to take off the cord, and whatever, naturally death is all right, otherwise we have to wait. But sometimes the economical problem, they say if they wait and the too much expenses have to pay for it, with nobody paying for it, no insurance, not coverage, all kind of variety of the problems we have to think about. And if my responsible party, I will say no need to any court or any support, and let it to die naturally. That's my way or our monks' way. But the ordinary people, they scary to, they are suffering, they want to take off the cord or something like that, or some other kind of emotional situation. So as a monks, we have to know how to treat the rest of the family member, not the person who in the trauma situation. So good time to discuss that topic and appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Bante Uparatana, for bringing up that aspect of the traumas in people's life, and how monks have to face with these difficult situations. And if monks are not equipped with the insights and experiences, it could be a traumatizing experience for them as well, and it could make them live the rest of their life with such traumas. So it is better to be prepared with understanding, with responsibility, and of course, I think monks, as they deal with these people, and they are listening to more stories, and is making them become a stronger people. So I think Bante Uparatana, what you said is a very interesting aspect of this service of the monk's life. So thank you. And next, let us go to Bante Santasobana from Los Angeles. Bante Santasobana, you also have a good understanding about the yoga and acupuncture. And what could you say to people, those who are still suffering from childhood traumas, and how to deal with them, how to overcome them?
Okay, thank you very much, Venerable Sirs. And I really appreciate that you bringing this topic, because it is one of the major important topic for all of us, and at the same time around the world. And we see that most of our people suffer because of their own life, not because something else. So when it comes to trauma, that we have to understand the background, that this word came like the early 17th century, and it's a Greek word and gave the meaning to wound. So that is how we get wounded, because of out of the, rather than emotional response, as I saw that a lot of online that Google explain, is kind of like emotional response. But when it comes to acupuncture, in the ancient time, in the Chinese explanation was, rather than emotional respond, the trauma or the wound happened out of emotional breakdown. So that is a very important point. So when your emotional flow breakdown because of disturb happen out of, it can happen out of anything, out of natural disaster, accidents, or even sometimes when we, as children, when we are go through any kind of pain, if someone don't care about us, then out of that disconnection, what happened, our energy dislocate. So as a result of that, deeply we get wounded. It is a system, because the energy and the system, it's not separate from something. It's not separate from mind. As example, how it explained in the Eastern culture of that healing, the lungs and the breathing doesn't depend on each other. The lungs itself, the breathing. So it's because the lungs doesn't have any desire to look for breathing. The lungs itself, the breathing. So the heart never look for the blood, the heart itself, the blood. So the life not look for comfort and the satisfaction, the life itself, the comfort and the satisfaction. So this, what happens when we break down the emotions, when we get wounded, we start to look for something rather than being with it. So as a result of that, what happens that our energy dislocate. So once the energy dislocate, how we recognize it? Because we are the one who responsible and it is within us. And as the topic mentioned, why most of the elders can't get get out of it, why we can't heal out of it? Because the reason, there are three things when the energy dislocate. One is that dislocation or the wounded energy refresh itself. It's kind of like it's a memorizing, and we give a value to that whatever happened, the wound. So then we empathize and we sympathize the wound, the situation. So rather than get out of it, as example, just imagine if I fell down and I say, oh, I fell down and no one was there for me to help. Oh, really? You know, that is so sad. Why it happened to you like that way? Why no one around you? Because you had a lot of students, you help a lot of, so we refresh that and, you know, keep trying to, that whatever happened to us is kind of like should not happen. So that is one thing most of the elders can't get out of it. And another thing is the impress. So like as example, we know in America came, there was a movement came, Me Too movement, that all the rape women, you know, that the rape women came to the society and start to tell, oh, it happened to me like that. So it's a kind of like we impress whatever the wound happened to us. We give a social validation to us, you know. So that way also we can't get out of it, because then we go for the evidence and we try to prove that, and it's become a huge drama for, you know. Another thing is the suppressing. So out of that, when we have no power to get out of it, and as example, if I get hurt and if I can't challenge for that, or if I can't overcome, I hold the deeper grudge and, you know, anger and the desire to one day get the revenge. So it's a deeper emotional breakdown. So those are the reasons that all the memory stagnates, the refreshing and impressing and the suppressing. When we do that emotional behavior, when we have that kind of things, what happen as a result of that, we gain the chronic pain. So whatever the chronic pain in our body, it has a link somewhere in our own history that we went through the emotional breakdown. So that's why we have the chronic pain. It's a scientifically proven. And then other thing is, this most of the illness came out of our emotional breakdown. Another one is the addiction. So if somebody go through a deeper addiction and some kind of illness that cannot get out of the medication or the surgeries, and sometimes the chronic pain, those are the symptoms that we can understand someone go through kind of like an emotional breakdown. So then how we can heal the person? So that is one of the important things. So when it comes to the Buddha's teaching, that most of the time when we go through emotional breakdown, we personalize it. We think, why it happened to me? It should not happen to me, you know? So one of the thing is to get out of any emotional breakdown or any trauma or any kind of wounded that happen out of the life, understand the reality of life. So because life itself suffering, you know, so there is no kind of like we can get into very concrete, unchangeable satisfaction in this conventional life. So life is suffering. So another thing is that everything changed. That whatever the situation we went through, it happened according to the necessary cause and conditions in that environment. So it's not going to happen in the very next moment. So if we understand that reality, we come to kind of like, and another thing is that we most of time that understand with the self-centered mind. So when it comes to the deeper understanding regarding the Buddha's teaching, we come to a point to recognize that we are part of the journey, not a kind of like that it personally happened to me. As example, the story of the Kisa Gautami, she thought that it happened to her child. Yeah. So then Buddha taught, okay, go and find the mustard, you know, the seeds from somewhere that if anywhere that no one, you know, died in a family. And she went to house to house and understood. It just happened to each and everyone, you know. Yeah. And so in that way, it give a whole kind of like a bio-psycho-social spectrum to understand that we are just part of this ocean, not we are just a separate wave from the ocean. So once we understand that, it give a kind of like a deeper level of way to resonate with the life, and at the same time as a solution how someone can get out of it. One is, as we all know, this body is a memory, it's a bunch of memory, network of memory. So start to do exercise. So that's why when it comes to yoga, it has a power to give a deeper healing to the body, because as we know, in our body, every 7 years, this each and every part of our body become renewed. Only one part not going to happen, that memory, the mind. So if you keep exercise, and it will help you to completely wash out this muscle memory. Then other thing is as our venerable sirs mentioned, that the practicing loving kindness, kind of like a giving the forgiveness. So that is one of the important thing. Another thing is here, as our Sanat Vihari mentioned, that I'm not, you know, agree with that the book he refer regarding the mindfulness, because that according to a practice, I think that person mentioned as mindfulness something else. When it comes to the Buddha's teaching, the mindfulness is clearly mentioned sati sampajanya. So the clear comprehension. There is no thoughts can happen at one time. So when you are capable to stay in the present moment exactly as it is, there is no way that your past memory can overwrite that moment. So that way, that as a solution, like Dr. Gabo Mate, and he's one of the very famous doctor around the world nowadays, talk about this, how to heal from the trauma. So, and then he always refer, go into the mindfulness meditation, because once you are capable to settle down with the moment, and if you are capable to appreciate the moment as who you are right now, right here, that will give a deeper healing connection yourself to get out of whatever the wounded happened in your past. So that when it comes to the mindfulness, that one of the solution to get out of the sanskara or the cankers or the memory happen or the wound that happened in our past is being mindful in the present moment. Do whatever exactly that as it is, and give your best for the moment. So that way you can recover. Another thing is that recognizing yourself and having the self-care and love regarding yourself, rather than neglecting and personalizing, oh, it happened to me like that. The very good example for this, and I think each and that the most of us should go into that story, the very famous spiritual teacher, Van Dyer. So he's a well-known spiritual teacher, and how he's transformed from his own trauma. He was a small child, and he saw how his father tortured his mother. and he has so much anger to kill his father. And he determined one day I'm going to kill him, and then the father disappeared and he didn't know where the father is. And then what happened when he became young, he got a gun and put his, close to him, and he started to look and track where the father, and he went state to state, place to place, motel to motel, looking for his father to kill him. And somehow finally he found out exact location. It took a long time for him to track him. He got the exact location, and then he knew this is the address, and he went to that city, and he booked a motel and spent the night there. And the very next day he loaded the gun inside that motel, and he knew very next day morning he go and kill his father because he gave a hard time to his mother, And then he went to that house and found out few days ago his father died. And then he went to his graveyard, and once he went to the graveyard, it's kind of like hitting the thunder, and the vein there start to reflect on the journey that he came with the anger to get the revenge from his father, and understood what I did for me myself, holding to this anger. He already gone. I never saw him, and he whatever he done to my mother, and after that many years he disappeared. But all these years with this anger, I am the one who suffered. And he dropped the gun, he threw the gun, and he transformed himself to give his life to all the other beings, to give kind of like do a good meritorious activities and transform himself. So it's kind of like when we go through something, we have to look ourselves and see, even though we went through hard time, even though we got wounded, how we can transform that ugliness to beauty. It's kind of like that Japanese, it's a kintsugi. You know that when this cup break down, they fix it and put the glue, the gold, and make it kind of like a more beautiful, it's a kind of like transform that imperfection to the value and perfection. So it's like how when we go through some kind of trauma, if anybody go through and listening right now, rather than hold it to that past memory, they have to think, still you are breathing. That is the best gift that you have. So then from this point, start to do something beautiful for you, and bring the gold, and fix that the broken that the bowl, and make it more valuable for tomorrow, and move forward. So that way it going to be helpful. And another thing is, when it go to acupuncture, just as example, if somebody go through a pain, and if there is a knot that we can feel, what we does, we slowly start to give a little bit pressure. And when we say this, we say, take a deep breath and release. You know what happened? When we push this way, not this touch is going to do anything. The deep breath itself going to release that pain. So that's why if anybody go through something, remember, always practice deep breathing at least seven times per day. It's kind of like a 7 deep, deep breathing. It's called ibuki. That it's one of the very famous way to get healed out of our breathing. So that's way that we can transform out of that whatever the situation, and become always better.
Yeah, I think Bhante Santasobana, you shared much more insights, light regarding today's topic, and how to deal with traumas and how to overcome them. And the good news is you're still breathing no matter what happened to you. And you can use this breath to heal yourself. I think anyone who can master the Anapanasati, the mindful breathing taught by the Buddha, the up to 16 steps, I think anyone can heal. And we use this technique to help people. And of course, Bhante Santasobana, I knew you have a good understanding about yoga, and you have, I know you can explain more about these things. So maybe later on, we will get back to you for more insights. So, and I have good news. The good news is that there are a lot of people who are watching today's program, maybe because of this topic. And we have some hellos from Africa, like Sierra Leone, and Europe, from Portugal, and of course United States, and of course Canada as well. And so today's topic is of great interest to people. So now next, let's go to Bhante Jayasara from New Jersey. Bhante Jayasara, I know you have a lot of experiences. So what can you say to people how to deal with childhood traumas and how to overcome them? You have to unmute yourself.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Bhante, and it's good to be with the Mahasangha. So yeah, my career before I became a monk was Child Protective Services. So for a little bit under a decade, I worked with children going through all kinds of neglect and abuse. And when I became a monastic, I started to realize how important it is to recognize this. As I was very happy with Bhante Sanatavihari's introduction. Some of the things I knew, and some of the I've been out of the field now 8 years or so. So there's new things to learn. But I think I wanted to cover two things, two aspects. The first is kind of how monastics can, if not help, at least not harm the people who will come to us. Because as we know, people in the West often who kind of come to Buddhism, there's lots of trauma or mental health issues, all kinds of things. And so I think it's very important for monastics to kind of at least know how to, if not help, not to do harm. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover. The second thing was I wanted to talk specifically more about the trauma and how somebody could work with that. I was, the very first time I ever taught a retreat, I had just become a Samanera, and Bhante Ji said, okay, now you're going to teach a day at the retreat. And I always remember this because at the end of this retreat, this young lady came up to me and she started talking to me. And it started to dawn on me that she was looking for validation from me to stop all of her medications and just use meditation. And I thought, whoa, oh, okay, this is actually quite, you have to be very careful with something like that. This is somebody who was looking to me as like an authority figure and, had all kinds of, I don't know her past. I don't know what happened in her past. I only spoke to her that one time. But it made me realize how important it is that I handle a situation like that with care. And I only knew that because of my past history, because I worked with, not only did I work with children and, being an investigator and also as a case manager, but in that duty, I also worked with lots of therapists. I had to work with the therapists who were working with the children and the family. And this was something that this experience that I had was very valuable because I can remember another experience where during a Q&A, some of the other monastics were answering the Q&A at that time, and somebody was talking to them, and they asked a question. It was a hard question. It was about trauma and mental health and things like that. And what the monastic said, it was a young monastic just like me, and I said, oh no, like this. And then in the retreat evaluations, it turned out there were two therapists at the retreat. And they said in the retreat evaluations, please be careful what you say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very important lesson to understand, that people are coming with their trauma, and their mental health issues and their drug abuse issues, all kinds of various issues. And, some of the Bhantes here are both like therapists and monks. Right? So they have the two things together. That's very good.
Yeah.
But the rest of us are not. So it's important to really kind of know how to deal with that. And what I'd like to give a link actually. The link is to a course. Some of you might know what first aid is when you go to a first aid course. Right? The purpose of giving first aid to somebody is if they're injured, you try to stabilize them so that the ambulance comes. Right? You're not the doctor, you're not the EMT. You're just trying to stabilize them. And so this mental health first aid course, this is what it's called. It's a international course. I took it 2 years ago as a monk, or right before COVID. I took it as a refresher, and it was actually very, very good. And again, it doesn't say like, okay, now you're the therapist. It says somebody is having reaction to their trauma. Somebody is having this or that. What should you do to get them help? And until help arrives and things like that. So it's a wonderful, wonderful course that I highly recommend anybody who is dealing with people do. This is now that COVID is over, I'm going to go and get reevaluated in it and do it again because it's such a good thing. So that's what I wanted to say in relation to the importance of our end of things, right? To make sure that if we can't help it, at least we're not doing any harm.
Yeah.
Because as it was said in the very beginning, most of us are not therapists. Right? We don't know. And we have lots of metta and compassion, and we love to share the Dhamma with people. And we have to be very careful because something, as it all has been said already, some things that might seem very small can be actually quite harmful. And of course, obviously, we don't have the intention to do that. So if we do that, we shouldn't, hurt or be too bad on ourselves. But it's important that we understand this. And the other thing that I wanted to now to switch to the other side is dealing with the trauma. I want to use the example of a friend that he came in, he was a resident at the monastery where I had become a monk, Bhavana Society. And we're about the same age, and we had been meditating for about the same amount of years, about 14, 15 years. And we would meditate together in the meditation hall, and everything would be quiet, and we would just be meditating. And all of a sudden, he would bolt right up and go right out. And he had started to tell me a little bit of what had happened to him as a child. And so I assumed it had something to do with his trauma. And I, got to know him more, and I spoke to him more, and he had been physically abused, sexually abused. I mean, the whole thing. He had been all kinds of abused, and I'm 44. I think I was about 40 at the time. So he was about 40, and even though he had been a meditator for 15 years, a very strong meditator, right? Still, when he would be in meditation, sometimes the thoughts of what had happened to him and various things would come up, and that would be his he had to kind of escape to some kind of to whatever, watching a movie or doing some kind of pleasant thing to distract him from it. And this is the kind of person that we may have come to us, right? And for us to understand it, I say this knowing that it's not necessarily 100% true, but I like to say meditation is not medication. And what I mean that is like in terms of like for what I think is the best thing for somebody with some kind of trauma is actually to have a team of people working with them. And let me explain why I believe this. When I was in my job, when I was a case manager, we would have what's called like a family team meeting. And it would be myself and the family members and therapists and whatever, maybe somebody was working, a play therapist for the kid, any people who were all working together for the family, we'd all come together. And I thought to myself, these last couple of years, I've been thinking about it, and I've actually started talking to a therapist who's also a lay teacher about the concept of having like at least like a Buddhist person, right, could have their therapist and also their monastic, their teacher. And it would be a wonderful thing if that therapist and that monastic teacher could actually work together for the benefit of the person, right, to help with the trauma. Because I do believe that the Buddhist practice actually can be very powerful in helping with trauma. And I think what Bhante Sanati Vihari was talking about, that book, I haven't read the book, but what I'd hazard to guess that possibly what was being meant there was that if you don't know how to deal with the trauma as it's arising, if you're just doing mindfulness and it's just arising and arising and you don't know what to do with it, then you're just suffering. But if you have like a therapist who's working with you and through, therapeutic modalities, and you have the monastic who's working with you from the spiritual and the mindfulness practice, then those two things, the mindfulness can be very, very powerful to say, oh, this has arisen, right? Because a lot of times things that keep coming up in the mind are really, it's because it's like the mind saying, you need to work on this. You need to like figure out how to incorporate this in a skillful, healthy way. Right? Many of the people that I worked with, child protective service workers, drug abuse counselors, many of those people were abused as children, had some kind of mental health issues, had some kind of drug abuse issues. So like a lot of the people who were helping people had experienced that same thing. And for the most part, they had been able to integrate that and to be able to move forward in a skillful way to help others. So I think that's doing this thing where that as a Buddhist person, you can have both modern Western therapeutic modalities. You could have even Ayurvedic or whatever modalities like acupuncture and different things, and you could also have the Buddhist teaching, the Satipatthana, right? The various practices. I think all of those can work together to help heal the person over time.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante, Sarah. Actually, what you said, don't harm, it reminded me of one time that His Holiness Dalai Lama said to a group of people, if you can't do any meaningful things for yourself and others, at least try not to harm anyone, including yourself. I said that's a very powerful saying. So thank you for sharing your insights with us and the audience. So let us go to next Bhante Nanda from Edmonton, Canada. Bhante Nanda, what can you say about today's topic and how to deal with childhood traumas and how to overcome them? What are your insights?
Thank you, Bhante, for giving me that opportunity. Especially all the Bhantes are sharing different techniques and methods to overcome childhood traumas. When I saw that topic on the email, first come to my mind one of the greatest Buddhist teaching called Vitakka-santana Sutta. In Vitakka-santana Sutta, Buddha mentioned that how to overcome thoughts from time to time. Especially, this has to be deal with people who has meditative background. People who don't have that, I think they should not try this, because it will be, as Bhante Jayasaro mentioned, it would be really, it is worse now. No, it is bad now. By doing that, it will become worse. So yeah, there are 5 techniques. I don't want to mention all of them, but I would like to share 2 of them especially. The first technique is when something bad thought come to your mind, reject or overcome it with a wholesome thought, like replacing an old wooden peg using a new one. Buddha gave that simile. So whenever we came across with childhood traumatized experiences, we as meditators, we have to see it mindfully, and then we have to replace that thought with a wholesome thought, instead being drowned with that unwholesome thoughts. And the second point that I would like to brought up here with think about the repercussion or the downside of the bad thought that you are dealing with. The thing that had happened in the past, you are bringing it up to right now. Let's say your parents or your elders did something bad to you in the past, but the person who is bringing up to right now, yourself, not someone else. So think that what I getting by recalling that memory, rewinding that memory, do I make it worse or make it better? So it is our choice to be happy or not to be. So in that way, there are 3 other techniques, but my mind was really my attention grabber was these 2 techniques. I think if any of Bantes or listeners who had experience or go through with these type of situations, it is good to rethink about it by using this method has been given the Buddha. So that is what I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Bhante. Actually, you brought our attention to a very important discourse of the Buddha, the Vitakka Santana Sutta. Those 5 techniques, actually, if you have experience in doing meditation, and even we can use, even I think modern psychologists and therapists could study the Vitakka Santana Sutta, and they can use these 5 techniques to help the people who are still suffering from childhood traumas. It's a very interesting discourse of the Buddha. And I also want to acknowledge the people who are actually saying hello from Germany, from Sri Lanka, from London, from other countries. It's amazing to see that people are joining us from all 5 continents, Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, North America. This is very interesting. Now, let's go to Venerable Trudeau from Florida. Venerable Trudeau, share your insights with us and the audience regarding how to deal with childhood traumas and how to overcome them.
Thank you so much for having me. Salutations to all the venerables and most venerables that is present today. It's really good to see some familiar faces here. For those who are new, who have not known my background, I would like to bring that up to the surface. So it's very similar to Venerable Jayasara's background as an interpreter serving all areas of law and medicine for the past more than, I think, 15 years now. I've got to witness a lot of cases across the board. Again, the addiction, the trauma, and the abuse in young adult life to adult life here in Florida. And ever since emerging as a monk, going on 7 years now, I've been engaged in direct counseling with people. And to my surprise, taking on this role, when people come forward in different stages of their lives, in their 80s, in their 70s, in their 60s, in their 50s, majorities from 30s to 50s. Upon listening to their story and journey and engaging in Buddhist psychotherapy, somewhere down the line of the journey, I would ask them, any history of addiction, trauma, or abuse? And there will always be a pause, and then it will emerge. And what I've noticed with the hundreds of people that I have counseled is that I noticed that they haven't stopped running. What does that mean? That means I don't think they know how to stop, because the mind's brain, the activity of the mind and the propensity of the mind is, I don't want to stop. I want to keep running, and I want to mask the pain. I want to cover up the pain with gambling, addiction, additional addiction, addiction to sex, addiction to alcohol, drugs, etc. And it's our opportunity as monks to seize that moment. One has to be very luminous, bright, and present fully, ultra supreme level of presence and when to jump in to ask the right question at the time. The timing of and the design of our question is very important. And so stopping is one of the basic principles in Buddhism. And to help them to just stop and sit for a second. Let's sit with this. Let's acknowledge this trauma that we have been running away for so long. And you know that's something easy said than done until the person really bring it up to the surface and fully acknowledge how they were beaten, why they were beaten, who beat them, you know, why are we so angry at our mothers for so long? What was said, what was not said? How do we open up this conversation again to start the healing process? I've had a woman who was in her 80s that hung on to anger against her mother for 60 years. And when she told me that, I looked at her and I said, you've been carrying this burden and this weight on your shoulder for 60 years. And she told me one thing I will never forget. And she said, Venerable, I just want to taste peace one last time before I die. I don't think she ever tasted peace throughout the entirety and totality of her life. And it was a very profound moment for me as a young monk, as a junior monk, to have witnessed someone that is of my grandmother's age to tell me that. So, you know, I was working with her. But again, the commonality and statistically that I have seen is, again, the suggestion for those who have gone through this. And, you know, as we get older, we tend to have this, you know, macho idea that we have to keep a front, we have to keep a persona, you know, a image strong for our family, strong to ourselves, strong to our co-workers, and so on and so on. But it's okay to revisit it one last time if that's what you've been running away from, if that is the addiction that we have engaged in modern day, in order to, you know, just not stopping. And again, I always tell people, let's practice Paticca Samuppada in a very easy way, dependent origination in an easy way, which is to trace the links of influence. Let's go back in time. Let's tell me that story again. And then we will start seeing the links, how anger was built up, the construction of anger, the logistics and mechanics of that anger for that particular individual. What makes Buddhist psychotherapy so difficult, and will probably be my next book after the completion of this book this year, is that you have to, a monk has to be so ever skilled to meet people where they're at in life and to see the complexities. Venerable Sanata Vihari knows this about cultural counseling. That is one of the hardest thing ever to fully grasp and engage in skillfully, right? Across different cultures, different religions, all right? And now we have secularism in there. So like a monk, a mind of a monk, the library in our heads has to be like, it is like a humongous library to know skillfully when to select the suttas, to know skillfully when to select the eclectic mode of modalities of treatment and therapies to meet this individual and give them world-class treatment as best as it is ever going to get. That's my thing, is higher standards equal better outcome. I take trauma very seriously with the amount of stories that come across. And, you know, it's an encouragement for monks engaging in this, is to constantly, again, use the links that Venerable Jayasara and Sanata Vihari and those who are within the background of psychology and counseling psychology to engage in. But yeah, I think this topic can go on for a very long, but I just wanted to make that contributions, and I'd like to yield the floor back to the remaining Venerables. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Venerable Trudeau. I think to help people who are suffering traumas, you need to have the better understanding of the cultural background. And if you know, their culture and how they think, how they do certain things, and accordingly, if you can use the Dhamma and teach the Dhamma or meditation, it would help them. So thank you, Venerable Trudeau, for bringing that aspect. Next, let's go to Bhante Jinananda from Ottawa, Canada. Bhante Jinananda, what can you say about today's topic, how to deal with childhood traumas and how to overcome them?
Thank you, Bhante. I just want to share the idea that the childhood trauma that we are talking about is something that an adult experience. So adults age is over, let's say 18. So this had happened to an adult many years ago, so that he or she has been living with that problem, bad experience for long. So in order to help this adult, I think we have many approaches, not necessarily one or two. And if I come with some Buddha solution, I think that would be the most important things in this discussion, because there are a lot of common and average and modern techniques are being talked so far. But I just want to focus on what the Buddha exactly said. If you look at the Theragatha and Therigatha, there are some stories that how the Buddha helped with some people who had bad experiences, not just arise couple of days ago. Kisa Gautami Patachara, they are not related to the topic today, because they experience those problems when they are adults. But we are talking about something people experience in their childhood, and now they are adults and struggle to overcome those things. So only thing we have is to make sure that the adults who experience the problem is to know that this is impermanent, because that is one of the salient features of the Buddha's teaching. You have been living with this for a long time, and now you have been experiencing this. So just in a simple way, but very friendly way, just to allow those people to talk a little bit. And then, so, yeah, as Bhante Jayasara said, we have positive side. We are monks as well as some psychologists, psychiatric, and also counselors. So we have double benefits out of this nature we have to help it. So in terms of making the adults who experience bad things from childhood, we can make sense that this is the thing you have been experiencing, and just look at your mind. So there are ample evidences in Buddha's teaching to show them that this is the thing you are experiencing. And look at the Buddha who helped with 1 or 2 words for those people who had some bad experiences from their childhood. I think too many things doesn't work. At least 1 or 2 things work. If I look at the discussion from an angle who, let's say, bad experience has so far, I have a hard time to pick up 1 or 2 things because there are so many things. Anyway, one of the wonderful things I heard from Bhante Nanda is to meditate without any prior aim so that you can pick up one or two avenues to overcome your own problems. So I don't want to talk too much because it's time running out. So Bante Kusala also is waiting for talking more. So wonderful. Thank you very much for insight. And I kept those website and also the program that Bante Jasaru mentioned. And also I have to read the book Bante Sanath Vihari mentioned. So they're wonderful. And thank you for the contribution. And because today I enjoyed very much listening to different views on the mental trauma that adults experience from their childhood. Thank you very much for the opportunity too.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante Jinananda, for bringing our attention to those monks and nuns, enlightened monks and nuns, actually, who actually openly talked about their traumas in their childhood, in their life as lay people, and how through meditation, through the practice of Dhamma, transform their life, which helped them become saints, arahants, and they were totally healed. I think what they realized was this is another aspect to understand. The samsara, the cycle of life, is full of all these unpleasant events. As long as we continue to be in this cycle of life, we will be the victims of all forms of abuses, no physical, verbal, and sexual, psychological abuses. It's because every human being is full of the lobha, dosa, moha, greed, anger, and ignorance. As long as people have these three poisonous roots, and of course, either they are going to abuse others, or others are going to become the victims, and this is the nature of the cycle of life. And so that's why those monks and nuns understood this, and they wanted to become completely free from the cycle of life as a way of becoming enlightened beings. So Bhante Kusala, what is your last point?
Bhante, because we are talking about childhood trauma, I want to highlight one thing very important, seeing that from my own family, especially my brother, who was abused as a child, both at home and at temples where he went for education. So I'm telling parents who are watching this important advice, be careful of the people you are trusting as adults. When you give your children to their care, it's within that trusted environment that a lot of abuse happens. And I can go into details if we had more time, but I also want to maybe continue this conversation maybe in another session, somehow in a future session, because when they are affected by anything that is traumatic, the children don't have the language to talk about it until they become adults, until they process things on their own. So let us raise awareness on this matter. I think look within your own families, especially parents who have not received enough love in their own lives. They may abuse their own children, and their adults who are around those families may also take any opportunity to abuse these children in different ways. And these children in turn are wounded. Their bodies keep records, and they may not be as productive as an ordinary person in the society. So I think it's from us, we need to look around, and we need to make sure that we do our job properly and continue healing, allowing that healing the society, healing ourselves, talking about these more often.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhante Kusala. And lastly, I would like to bring everyone's attention to two important books authored by I just lost his name. Well, I can mention the titles of the books: The Hardwiring Happiness, and the second one is Buddha's Brain. So these two books, are highlighting some important aspects of the brain. And the way I see all the childhood experiences, traumas, is part of this. We have two brains: the Velcro brain and the Teflon brain. The purpose of the whole purpose of the Velcro brain is to make people miserable, and it doesn't want it to be happy. If anything that bad happened to you, the Velcro brain wants you to remember it. Velcro brain wants you to repeat it over and over again, and then it is so. When you get caught up with this Velcro brain, so you begin to feed it every day, thinking about it, and you're feeding this Velcro brain, so it becomes stronger. I think this is the very reason why people are still suffering from childhood traumas as adults. So there's a good news. There's a good brain that is called the Teflon brain, and the Teflon brain is a good brain. The purpose of the Teflon brain is to make people happy. But unfortunately, Teflon brain is very weak at the moment, and we are not feeding it enough. So the way I understand, if we want to recover from any traumas, if we want to live a healthy life, we need to make a major shift. They shift attention to the good brain, the Teflon brain, and start feeding it and nurturing it, watering it. And to do this, is the Samma Vayama, right, effort that we have to make in 4 steps. Prevention, whatever that happened in the past, prevent from such things. And elimination, if there are some pains, now we have to make an effort to root out all these pains and traumas bit by bit. And to become healthier, then we need to do something new, positive, good ones. So we have to make an effort to cultivate the healthy thoughts, healthy stuff. And then Anurakana, we need to keep doing this good stuff. And if we keep feeding the Teflon brain, the good brain, I believe we can overcome any traumas in our life. So with this in mind, I wish I had more time.
Can you mention the 2 books in the chat box? I think the people from Facebook and YouTube never see these books. If you can.
Okay. It's called the Buddha's Brain. I see somebody mentioned it here, Muniputto, Buddha's Brain, the Practical Neuroscience of Happiness, Love, and Wisdom by Rick Hansen. Here we go, Rick Hansen.
The other thing, no, I'm talking about the books Bhante Sanath Vihari mentioned here.
Yeah, he already mentioned, okay, that is the Flowers in the Dark, Reclaiming Your Power to Heal from Trauma with Mindfulness by Sister Dang Ingiem. And the other one is The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma book by Bessel van der Kolk. So these are interesting books. And also please read those 2 neuroscience books, Hardwiring Happiness and The Buddha's Brain. Anyways, I know Bhante Nanda raised your hand, Bhante Santosoma raised your hand. Now we have come to the end of the discussion. And I'm very happy to tell all of you that today we had people from all the continents, 5 continents, and they're saying hello to you. They're appreciating your wisdom. And I have a kind request. If possible, please share this discussion in your social media timelines for your friends and colleagues to benefit from today's discussion, who are going through the pains, who are still struggling. And these insights, I'm very positive, will help them a lot. So with this in mind, now let me invite Bhante Saranapala from, actually my name is also Bhante Saranapala. This is Bhante Saranapala from Vancouver, Canada, to recite the Over the Patimokkha verses today.
නමෝ තස්ස භගවතු අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස සබ්බ පාපස්ස අකරණං කුසලස්ස උපසම්පදා සච්චිත්ත පරියෝදපනං ඒතං බුද්ධාන ශාසනං කන්ති පරමං තපෝතිතික්ඛා නිබ්බානං පරමං වදන්ති බුද්ධා නහි පබ්බජිතෝ පරෝපඝාති සමනෝ හෝති පරං විහෙඨයන්තෝ අනුපවාදෝ අනුපඝාතෝ පාතිමොක්ඛේච සංවරෝ මත්තඤ්ඤුතාච භත්තස්මින් පන්තංච සයනාසනං අධිචිත්තේච ආයෝගෝ ඒතං බුද්ධාන ශාසනං
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante Sanapala, for beautifully reciting the over the Patimokkha verses today. And also I want to just mention two more books. This is from Kane Rumonno, who was watching the program in YouTube. And these two books are The Places That Scare You and When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. So these two books are very interesting. I highly recommend people to read these two books as well if you're still dealing or struggling with your traumas. So I'm very grateful to all of you, to all the venerable monks and nuns, to our lay people for joining today. And may all the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha be with you, and for your health and safety. May Devas continue to protect and guard all of you with the divine blessings for your health and safety. And Sabbe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitatta. May all sentient beings be happy. I will see you all in 2 weeks' time. Until then, all of you stay well and happy. Good night. Bye-bye.